Because people who believe that they are superior would have no need to pass laws discriminating against other people and excluding them from the ability to compete on a level playing field.
Hey, lovely viewer. Welcome back to Comfort for Life. Glad to have you, amazing viewer. Thank you so much for being part of Comfort for Life Network. You're loved and appreciated here. Do me a favor, if you're new here, subscribe to the channel and also like the video. Kindly, you're watching the video, like it for recommendation. Let's shift our focus from the bridge in this video and delve into the issue of diversity, which was suggested to be the cause of the incident. We'll be exploring the depth of such a blame. I will let you listen to the few stitches that I put together and let's interact. Don't hesitate to leave your thoughts in the comment section. I love interacting and I know we are here to make that change. So leave your thoughts.
Whenever conservatives attempt to gaslight or shame us for politicizing tragedy and crisis in the moment when we are seeking solutions, just remember that in the absence of any information or investigation, they will not waste a minute to blame marginalized people. They have to strike while the iron of ignorance is hot. And as for Phil Lyman's claim that the Baltimore Bridge collapse was the result of DEI, never forget that the moniker "didn't earn it" belongs to the people who had to create the illusion of their excellence by legally excluding everybody else and claiming the work of others as their own. Because people are hired not on the basis of qualifications but skin color is an accurate description of all of United States history up until 1964. And let's get something straight. The 200 years of affirmative action that white men gave themselves did not stem from a belief that they are inherently superior to everybody else. It is deeply rooted in an insecurity that they are in fact inferior. Because people who believe that they are superior would have no need to pass laws discriminating against other people and excluding them from the ability to compete on a level playing field. People who are actually secure in their skills and their abilities and their qualifications welcome competition from others because they recognize that competition is healthy. It stimulates growth. It stimulates innovation. To borrow a phrase from AAVE, bring it on. It is only people who are insecure about their inferiority who feel compelled to exclude other people from competition in order to uphold the fiction that their mediocre stagnation is in fact success. And I strongly urge you to consider that you do not want to get into a contest of measuring which demographic has been in positions of leadership over the highest number of accidents and disasters, because I guarantee it will not go well for you. The idea that higher education admissions is a zero-sum game because there are a finite number of seats is an example of how the myth of scarcity is a characteristic that upholds white supremacy culture. The idea being that we would love to help everybody, but there are only so many seats to go around. But colleges and universities have expanded to accommodate population growth, expanded to accommodate women, and have expanded to accommodate new fields of study. So after nearly 60 years, there's been ample time and opportunity for colleges and universities to expand to accommodate equitable racial representation. Second of all, when colleges and universities make a choice to discriminate against Asians, that is affirmative action for white students. If colleges and universities were to keep affirmative action but stop discriminating against Asians by treating them the same as white applicants, what that would mean is that white applicants would have to be as competitive as Asian applicants. That's the reason why it doesn't happen. That's why colleges and universities choose to discriminate against Asians and conflate it with affirmative action. And then we believe that in order to open the required number of seats to implement affirmative action, those seats have to be taken away from Asians because it would be unthinkable to take seats away from white students. And that is how the myth of scarcity upholds white supremacy in higher education and perpetuates the discrimination of Black, Brown, Indigenous, and other people of color, because you can, in fact, make more seats. Edward Bloom wanted Asian Americans to blame Black people for their not getting into college, and Edward Bloom and the Supreme Court want Black people to blame Asian Americans for affirmative action being banned. But 70% of Asian Americans support affirmative action. And if you break it down by ethnicity, among Japanese Americans, I think that the approval is as high as 86%. I think that Chinese Americans have the lowest approval rating, and even then it is 56%. There is no Asian ethnicity where a majority disapprove of affirmative action. And in the most recent case, there were more Asian Americans involved in the lawsuit in supporting Harvard and in filing amicus briefs in support of affirmative action than there were Asian American plaintiffs who sued Harvard. Now, to answer your question, the reason why some Asian Americans think that this decision is a win for them is because they fell for divide and conquer tactics and they aligned with whiteness and they blamed Black people for their not getting into college. something I'll touch upon as long as we do understand that a lot of Asian Americans like myself are aware of this and it doesn't change our support of affirmative action. Research has indicated that if college admissions was based purely on GPA and standardized test score, then enrollment among Asian Americans would increase slightly, but we're talking about 0.1%. And it's also indicated that the 12% or so of Asian Americans currently enrolled in college who did benefit from affirmative action under such a system would likely lose their seats, and they tend to be Asian Americans who come from lower income families. On a purely personal note, when I was applying to the University of Michigan in the 1990s, it was generally thought that being Asian American is a disadvantage in college admissions. And what my dad told me is that since I am a first generation born Asian American, I have a lot of privilege. I was born and raised in a country that was stolen from Native Americans, that was built off the free labor of enslaved Black people. Furthermore, I'm not the descendant of a railroad Chinese. I am not the descendant of a Japanese American who was interned during World War II. And at that time, we thought that I was not the descendant of anybody who was negatively impacted by the Chinese Exclusion Act. It turns out that wasn't true. But what my dad said was, if the University of Michigan is going to remove a 1/4 point from your application because you're Asian American, and that is necessary in order to redress historical harm done to Black people and Native Americans, then so be it. And what the stereotypical Asian hard work ethic meant in my household is you just need to work that much harder to make up for that 1/4 point. And what you don't do is you do not blame the people who have historically been harmed. What you do is you work hard to change the system. So I am disappointed in my fellow Asian Americans who don't seem to understand that.
We don't want to be classified as white. Let's just be honest about that. That's what all the arguments against systemic racism are about. Telling people that they should judge based on character rather than skin color, that we shouldn't use DEI principles in hiring practices. We don't want to be classified as white. And we don't want to be classified as white because we know what being white means.
White people get really insecure when you say anything about white, right? Like you say, like, white people this, they're like, oh, no, white people, but they don't understand that the skin color, the little skin color, that little peachy, whatever your shade is, or lack thereof, that's not what people are talking about. They're talking about whiteness, which is this concept of white supremacy and everything that comes with it that was forged over hundreds of years and really in the 1600s solidified to keep people subjugated, to keep the 1% very, very rich, to make sure that poor white people felt superior so that they could continue to exploit them and they wouldn't band together with Black people in order to overthrow the elite ruling class. So like if you're a white person, you get insecure when people say white people this, white people that, and critique, you need to engage your own feelings. Engage your own feelings around that and realize if you're insecure, you got some growing to do. As do I.
We know what whiteness has done, and we know that race has always been a factor that's worked in our benefit. And now that it's no longer working in our benefit in the same way, now that we can't drown out the voices of the people that are telling us we're not quite as popular as we thought we were, we don't want to be white anymore. But if we're willing to admit that, then we have a chance at dismantling white supremacy culture. If we don't, then white is all we'll ever be. I'm going to answer your question with a couple questions of my own. You asked, can a poor, powerless white person be racist in a predominantly Black country where the systems are run by Black people? The first question I have for you is, does that exist at all? Where on the planet is this scenario happening? Can you name one predominantly Black country that escaped the tyranny of European imperialism and colonialism? Because if you can't, then I don't see the point of this hypothetical scenario. I suppose in a hypothetical world where Europeans didn't conquer and oppress Africans and people of African descent, we could have a different conversation. But this is not a hypothetical world. I mean, even in places like Liberia, where white people can't become citizens, that country was set up for formerly enslaved people returning to Africa. It was established as a haven from racial oppression. Every single conversation about racism has to start with the understanding that Europeans created the concept of race in order to conquer and oppress Black people. So the next question I have is, why do you feel like it's important to be able to identify Black people as racist? Is it because they say what you might call hurtful things about white people? Is it because you don't like the feeling of being associated with an oppressive system or attitude? What is it? That's a question you'll have to answer for yourself. When it comes down to it, racism is a white problem. Our ancestors created it. Therefore, it's our job to see it for what it is, address it, and work to dismantle it if we don't like it. So let's put any problems we have with this system on our ancestors for creating it and ourselves for upholding it, and not the people or the descendants of the people that they conquered, subjugated, and oppressed.
Africa became the hunting ground for the European colonizers, and we were the sport. Our ancestors built the United States of America. Our ancestors built Europe. And when slavery had lost its shine and sheen, the Europeans abolished it. But they replaced it with yet another pernicious enterprise, the colonization of Africa. The Europeans sat in Berlin, in Germany, in 1884, and they looked at the map of Africa and parceled it out. The British had their share, the Germans had their share, and Tanzania or Tanganyika was their share, as was Rwanda and Burundi. The Spaniards were Johnny-come-latelys in the arena, and they got little Equatorial Guinea and Southwest Africa.
We need Africa to be impoverished because we need those raw materials and we need them dirt cheap. Okay, so that's the message. It doesn't mean to say that there's nothing Africans can do. Of course there is. This is what it's about. Because if Africa does do something different, I assure you living standards of all those in Europe and North America and Asia is going to fall. Okay, and that is a big price to pay. I assure you that the West is not going to allow that without a big fight. Okay, so the job of many Western academics is to convince Africans they have to keep doing what they're doing. Okay, and to show them it's your fault that you're poor. It's not our fault. It's your fault that you're poor. You know, so this is what we do in academic institutions. We know the basic forces that have caused this underdevelopment. We know it's colonization. We cannot afford to allow Africa to industrialize and start producing manufactures. Okay, so we will do everything to stop that. And I'm going to show you how we actually block that. We had East Asian rapid industrialization processes. So in the earlier period, we had Japan and Korea and Taiwan. Okay, rapid growth, sucking in raw materials from Africa, driving up the prices. After those countries finished industrialization, then sub-Saharan African growth rate again fell. Sub-Saharan Africa is condemned to this role, just a supplier of raw materials, not a manufacturer. The currencies are collapsing of these countries, and many of them are sub-Saharan African countries. After colonization ended, we needed new structures to keep these countries where they were. Okay? And the first of those is aid. Okay, we give them aid. Aid for what? Actually, we give them aid to keep repressive regimes in power. That's all. All the hypocrisy about transparency and democracy and bullshit like that, it's all bullshit. But it would go to country after country offering loans. And if the president did not accept the loan, they were killed. It's just economics. It's economic warfare. The rich declare war on the poor. It happens everywhere. It happens in a country. The rich control the government. Of course they do. You really believe you have democracy? Come on. I mean, grow up. Who has all the subsidies and income support? US, Europe. The largest budgets in the world for supporting their farmers are Europe and US. You see, we're keeping them dependent. We're keeping them on a string. This next round of the WTO is designed to block that. To block anyone else getting staying on top of the ladder.
Brings me to what I think the primary point of the AAPI history mandate is, since we've established that Florida doesn't care about making Asians happy. It is about divide and conquer. It is the counterpoint to the state of Florida refusing to include AP African American history, because I've talked a lot about how Asian Americans are used as a racial wedge against Black people. I think that curriculum would push the model minority myth, which, as I've said before, oppresses Black people in particular by saying that the American dream can come true, that Asian Americans are proof of that. So if there are demographics who are not able to accomplish what Asian Americans accomplish, then that is a cultural failing of that particular demographic. And that is always being pointed at Black people. So I think the primary purpose is divide and conquer. Which brings me to another point, which I think that the state of Florida is trying to capitalize even more off the prison industrial complex and is essentially trying to amp up and reinstitute chattel slavery. We see that the state of Florida does not want immigrants because what's even better than paying immigrants poorly is using free prison labor. So my concern is that at some point in the near future, the state of Florida will be in a state of emergency, either due to something like a hurricane or face some infrastructure crisis. And they will say that as an emergency measure, they must resort to prison labor, and that will open the door to ramping up the system of chattel slavery through the prison industrial complex.
I appreciate that you watched to this extent. Thank you so much for being part of Comfort for Life Network. We are here for unity, love, and justice. We will keep advocating for justice. We'll keep advocating for unity, for reconciliation, for equality, especially that. And also, one day, we will keep talking until we are able to challenge such systems that are oppressive to us, you know. There will be a day that things will change, and we are waiting for that turn to take place, but it's a very horrible place to be in, especially coming from a place where I've experienced war for like decades. In my country, I would say that I have felt this. I've felt how Europeans always have to divide to dominate. And also education systems. We have also to revise our education systems, even in Africa, and see how we can be able to take ourselves out of this kind of slavery that is indirectly. So that was my thought on this. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and thank you so much for watching.